The security guy gave me a look as if I had just emerged from under a rock. I could almost picture him estimating my net worth at $12 and some pocket lint as his gaze moved from my faded jeans to my old college sweatshirt. With all the authority of someone who had been working here for precisely 3 days, he moved forward and blocked my way to the Grand Meridian Hotel's main entrance. The sneer that appeared on his face when I told him I was attending the Wong Ashford engagement party could have made milk curdle. He pointed with his fat finger to the side of the building where a small sign said, "Service in Trance," and he truly laughed. It seems that assistance was required to use the proper door. Kinsley Wong is my name. My age is 32. And I probably looked like I had gotten lost on my way to deliver takeaway at that precise time, standing in my purposefully casual attire. Considering what I actually did for a job, I was aware of the irony, but I remained silent. A 5-star meal is sometimes the best form of retaliation. Before I go any further, kindly click the like button and let me know in the comments where you are listening and what time it is. I'm grateful. 2 weeks ago, Madison, my sister, called me with the zeal of someone asking you to their own execution. She had made it very clear that her future in-laws, the Ashfords, were picky and that I should try to look respectable for once. Over the phone, she had actually used air quotes. They are audible in her voice. Additionally, she casually stated that the Ashfords were old money and wouldn't understand internet jobs, so perhaps I shouldn't bring up my small online business. With his radio crackling with importance, the security guy continued to stare at me. I could have presented my ID to him. One phone call could have made all the difference. However, where was the enjoyment in that? Rather, I gave a charming grin and made my way to the service entrance. The sound of my worn-out trainers on the pavement. A familiar voice screamed across the parking lot as soon as I got to the side entrance. Madison herself, dressed in what appeared to be a frock that cost more than the average person's monthly rent, clicked on the pavement in heels that were most clearly not meant for walking. Her expression was a masterwork of bewilderment and barely disguised terror. She glanced directly at me, then through me, and finally at the security guy who was describing how he had rerouted the delivery person to the correct entry. Madison let out a hesitant laugh, the same kind she'd had since high school when she felt ashamed of her affiliation. "These people always get confused about where they belong," she observed, dismissively waving her well-groomed hand. Her own sister is one of these folks. I walked through the service entrance with my head held high, biting my tongue till I tasted copper. There was mayhem in the kitchen. It smelt of pricey beef and garlic and was pure lovely chaos. Before I could object, Wellington, a young chef, put an apron into my hands because he thought I was the replacement server they had been waiting for. After giving me a quick glance, the head chef, Phipe, a massive man who seemed to speak only in French profanity and disappointed sighs, said, "I was on prawn duty. I was elbowed deep in crustaceans in a matter of minutes, peeling and deaning as if my life depended on it." The new member of the kitchen crew was hardly noticed by the other employees. They were too preoccupied with rumors about the catastrophe that was taking on upstairs. Madison reportedly returned 3 deliveries of champagne because they weren't sufficiently colored. The servers were betting on how many times she would decide to alter her mind regarding the placement of napkins. 6 people were counted as of right now, and the celebration had not yet begun. In that kitchen, I discovered more about my sister than I had over the previous 5 years of intermittent family dinners. For weeks, she had been intimidating the staff with her demands. She had changed the menu 17 times and insisted on having the flowers brought in from Ecuador because the local roses were too commonplace. The pastry maker was moved to tears by the engagement cake design, according to a server. However, the Ashfords were the subject of the real tea, as the younger servers put it. They said that the money was so old that it had all but vanished. Mrs. Ashford spent 40 minutes describing how their family had been throwing parties since before the hotel was even constructed after arriving earlier to view the space. She had mentioned so many deceased family members that I considered setting up a memorial table. Madison appeared in all her bridezilla glory as the kitchen door sprang open as if someone had kicked it. Her face was the specific shade of crimson that indicated someone had done something unacceptable, like breathing improperly somewhere. With her heels clicking like irate typewriter keys, she went across the kitchen and demanded to know why the champagne wasn't properly chilled to precisely 37.5 degrees. Madison seemed uninterested in facts. despite Felipe's attempts to clarify that the champagne was at the ideal serving temperature. Perfection that would wow the Ashfords was what she desired. I was wrist-deep in prawns when she raced past the prep station, so near that I could smell her perfume, the same one she had taken from my apartment 3 years prior, and she never came back. She didn't even look in my direction. She saw me as simply another unseen helping hand that made her ideal day possible. One of the servers murmured that the Ashfords were already upstairs telling anybody who had listened that their son could have done better as she stormed back out. The child doing the dishes chuckled and said that he had heard Mrs. Ashford talking on the phone in the lavatory, trying to persuade her son to call off the engagement before it was too late. My thoughts were racing as I continued to peel prawns. The Ashfords are attempting to ruin my sister's engagement. The staff is terrified of Madison. I hadn't even reached the major event yet, but this was already becoming quite the soap opera. I completed my shrimp duty. With my apron still on, I slipped out of the kitchen after telling Fipe I needed a restroom break. I needed some alone time. Therefore it was ideal that the service lift was vacant. I hit the button for the executive level of the penthouse, which is my level, rather than the party floor. I purchased the Grand Meridian Hotel chain 3 years ago. Not only this hotel, but all 17 establishments nationwide. My holding company, KU Enterprises, handled the transaction, and I purposefully omitted my name from the majority of the documentation. I could wander through my homes without being treated as the owner, and it was also cleaner that way. When individuals are unaware that you are the boss, you discover a lot about your company. My private office suite was accessible through the lift, and I unlocked the door with my thumbprint. The party downstairs was nothing like the space. My assistant had placed the weekly reports on my desk in this quiet, minimalist space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. But at the moment I had no interest in numbers. The security monitors that displayed all of the hotel's public areas piqued my interest. I located the ballroom by flipping through the cameras. The Ashfords in all their splendor were there. Mrs. Ashford's face had that strange rigidity that suggested her plastic surgeon had been a little too zealous with the Botox, and she appeared to have been vacuum-sealed into her dress. A gaggle of women who appeared to have been ordered from the same country club catalog encircled her as she held court close to the bar. It was almost humorous how I had created this empire while my family believed I was having trouble with a small internet business. In retrospect, Madison had been really proud of her marketing position at a mid-tier company. She was always willing to provide me with job postings and career guidance, which she believed would be more appropriate for someone with my limited experience. In the meantime, I had been stealthily constructing a hospitality empire, beginning with a failing hotel that I had purchased with all of my funds and a loan that had kept me up at night for months. Although I had done a lot of the work myself and learnt the industry from the ground up, the remodeling had been harsh. Before I had a portfolio that would make those wealthy Ashfords cry into their trust funds, that hotel had led to another and another. Please take a moment to subscribe to the channel and leave a comment if you're still enjoying this story of family strife and undiscovered triumph. You have no idea how much your support helps, and I assure you that the greatest part is still to come. Just in time to see something intriguing, I focused on one of the security cameras. Neither Fipe nor anyone I knew from the kitchen were involved in Mrs. Ashford's heated discussion with a member of the catering crew. She was putting what appeared to be cash in his hand. With a nod, the man fled in the direction of the kitchen. I watched their full exchange on the video from 5 minutes ago because I was curious. The body language was evident despite the muffled audio. The man was nodding eagerly like a dog as Mrs. Ashford gave directions, pointing to different parts of the ballroom. This has nothing to do with serviette placement or champagne temperature. I quickly called my head of security and asked him to monitor the situation without getting involved just yet. I then put on my server's apron once more. Mrs. Ashford was going to discover that the house always prevails if she wanted to play games at my hotel. As I watched Madison desperately try to win over her future mother-in-law, the security film continued to play. Madison was laughing too loudly at every awful joke Mr. Ashford made about his golf game, and she was constantly changing her outfit whenever Mrs. Ashford glanced at her. Seeing someone try to fit into shoes that were 3 sizes too small was excruciating. I returned to my server's uniform, picked up a tray of champagne glasses from the kitchen, and went into the ballroom. It was like passing through a portal from Kansas to Oz when the service sections changed to the party area. Madison had chosen what I could only characterize as Kardashian meets Downtown Abbey, if us had been adorned by someone with excessive wealth and poor taste. There were enough flowers to fill a botanical garden, and LED illumination competed with crystal chandeliers. The Ashford appeared to prefer to be somewhere else as they stood close to the center of it all, with the expression of a man slowly being strangled by his own bow tie. Their son Brett, of course his name was Brett, stood next to them. I walked about with my tray, invisible in that strange way that waiters get at posh gatherings. Rich people have this incredible capacity to steal items from your tray while staring right through you, as if the champagne had suddenly appeared in their hands out of sheer willpower. Mrs. Ashford was babbling on about their family's Connecticut estate, telling anybody who could hear that they had to fire several employees since quality assistance is hard to come by these days. She took a drink from my tray without even looking at me, so it seemed ironic that she said this. Although his gaze kept straying to the closest exit, her spouse nodded in agreement. Then I heard something that stopped me cold. Madison was informed by Mrs. Ashford that they would need to talk about the wedding's financial arrangements, particularly how Madison's family would contribute to their son's investing portfolio. I'd negotiated enough business deals to know a shakedown when I heard one, even though she made it sound informal. Madison was nodding enthusiastically, assuring her that her sister was a successful investor who would undoubtedly want to support the union, and that her family had riches. I almost let my tray fall. Madison was using me, the sister she had pointed out at the service door, as a fictitious source of funding. I swear, as I replenished my tray at the service station, Brett's brother Chase called me these names. With his slicked back hair and a smile that had definitely worked on 19-year-old Instagram models, he was the kind of person who believed his trust fund made him desirable. Reeking of entitlement and perfume, he leaned in and asked if I had breaks or if I was working this party all night. I assured him that I would continue to work till the task was completed. In fact, he gave me a wink. Winked as if we were watching a terrible love comedy in which the wealthy boy develops feelings for the servant girl, that he urged me to find him later if I wanted to earn some real money after slipping what he likely believed to be a small $100 bill onto my tray. I stepped away, adding his proposal to my mental list of things that would make this evening even more intriguing. Despite the bile rising in my throat, I heard more and more bits of the puzzle as I moved around. The Ashfords were identified by disclosing their alleged connections, homes they owned, and financial opportunities they were pursuing. However, there was something strange about it all, as if they were making an excessive effort to prove their qualifications. I sneaked into the business center off the main ballroom during a quiet moment and took out my phone. My suspicions were confirmed by a few fast searches and phone calls to my network. The Ashfords had no money, selling the family silver destitute and drowning in debt, not just a bit short on cash. 3 mortgages were attached to their estate. They had several creditors' loans against them, and their investment portfolio had been liquidated 2 years prior. Everything made sense all of a sudden. They weren't attempting to prevent the wedding because they didn't think Madison was suitable. They believed Madison's family had money, therefore they were desperate for it to happen. Mrs. Ashford's financial arrangements were not contributions. They wanted a rescue. I nearly burst out laughing at the cosmic humor of it all. The Ashfords were secretly hoping that my sister's fictitious wealthy family would keep them out of bankruptcy, while they looked down their surgically altered noses at everyone. And here Madison was acting like someone she wasn't in order to win over others who were acting even more phony. I resumed serving champagne, but this time I was paying close attention. Mrs. Ashford was becoming more outspoken, telling her acquaintances that Madison's family would be funding some of Brett's endeavors. Unaware that she was being used as the golden goose in a scam, Madison stood close by, grinning and nodding. With every round of drinks, the celebration was getting louder and louder. I saw the man Mrs. Dashford had bribed earlier doing something suspicious close to the sound system, palming what appeared to be a USB drive. I had to choose whether to act or let whatever sabotage she had planned take place. At that moment I noticed David, my general manager, waiting at the ballroom entrance with a folder in his hand and a worried expression. I knew very well what was in that folder while he scanned the crowd for someone. David was here to discreetly handle the Ashford's party bill that had just bounced. It was going to get rather interesting that evening. I snuck back into the business center and made a number of phone calls that, if Madison had known about them, would have made her head spin. First, my CFO, who verified my suspicions regarding the Ashfords' financial status. Their Connecticut estate was in danger of going into foreclosure in around 6 weeks. Secondly, my legal staff began preparing records that could be useful in the future. Third, and above all, my general manager David, who continued to loiter at the ballroom entrance like a worried dad at a teenage party. I instructed David to wait 20 minutes before discussing the bounce check with anyone. He nodded, but I could tell he was confused. He trusted me enough to not question me even though he sensed something was wrong. Because of this, he was well worth his 6-figure salary, which, incidentally, was likely more than the Ashfords' total assets. Madison had taken up the microphone back in the ballroom and was thanking everyone for coming to celebrate their love. The phrase joining of two great families was actually used by her. And if Mrs. Ashford's face could still move in that manner, I saw it twist into what might have been a smile. She appeared to be attempting to answer a challenging maths problem thanks to the Botox. Madison continued to express her gratitude for finding Brett. How well matched their families were. This was the worst part. She revealed that her incredibly successful investor sister was watching everything in secret tonight, and would later make a big announcement regarding the wedding. I almost choked on my own saliva. I was a prop in Madison's fantasy. I had no idea that I was 10 feet away, carrying a dish of crab cakes that nobody was eating since Mrs. Ashford had loudly declared them to be pedestrian. There was clearly something going on with the USB drive guy from earlier. I recognized the setup after he hooked anything into the sound system. The sneer on Mrs. Ashford's face indicated that the audio file she had handed him would begin to play in roughly 5 minutes. There would be no wedding bells. Before it could start playing, I texted my head of security to download everything off the USB and back up all of our surveillance footage from the last 2 hours. Mrs. Ashford was going to discover that she had chosen the wrong hotel to play dirty. Near the service station, Chase Ashford cornered me once more. This time, he put his hand on my lower back and told me about his cryptocurrency endeavors and how, if I was good to him, he could alter my life. His proposal was rendered even more pitiful by the fact that cryptocurrency had collapsed 3 months prior, and his efforts were probably worth less than the lint in my pocket. Before I did something that would undoubtedly reveal my identity, I told him I had to replenish my tray and fled. For example, tell him how many times I could purchase and sell his whole family. Phipe appeared as though he had just survived a battle when he came out of the kitchen. It seems like Madison had provided him conflicting messages regarding the dinner service. It was first moved up by 30 minutes, then back by 45, and finally restored at the same time, but with an entirely different menu. I didn't blame the kitchen staff for being on the verge of rebellion. I made an executive decision and instructed Phipe to serve supper using the original menu at the original time. He gave me a doubtful glance. I was just the shrimp girl who had come in from the street, after all. However, he must have been persuaded by something in my tone because he nodded and withdrew to his realm in the kitchen. My phone now had the surveillance footage I had asked for, and it was even better than I had anticipated. In addition to bribing someone to ruin the celebration, Mrs. Ashford was caught on camera searching Madison's purse after my sister had left it at her table. She had taken a picture of something inside, most likely Madison's ID or credit cards, the kind of details required for a credit report or background check. With his packet in hand, David eventually made his way into the ballroom and started navigating the crowd. The group was doing generic jazz, which is akin to lift wallpaper in terms of sound. I watched him walk over to the head table where both families were seated, Madison's parents appearing to prefer watching Jeopardy at home, and the Ashfords looking regal in their borrowed elegance. David leaned down and spoke softly, perhaps requesting that Ms. Wong address a pressing issue. Madison's face lit up and I saw it. Naturally, she assumed he meant her. She straightened her clothes and got to her feet, prepared to deal with whatever small mishap had occurred. However, David passed her by. I felt the time had come as he continued to move and look about the room. I put down my serving tray and made my way over to him. David was no longer paying attention when Madison said something about how he must be perplexed and that she was Ms. Wong. He had seen me. More valuable than all the hotels in my portfolio was the expression on Madison's face when David came up to me, dressed in my discolored server's apron and with my hair tied back in an untidy bun. Like a fish that had just realized air wasn't water, her mouth expanded and closed. Miss Wong, we have a situation with the Ashford party payment, David said loudly enough for the neighboring tables to hear as he gave me the folder while nodding professionally. Due to insufficient funds, the check has been returned. You might have heard a pin drop from space during the ensuing total quiet. In around 3 seconds, Madison's expression changed from bewildered to mortified to furious. She began yelling that security had to take me out right now because my pitiful attempts at humor were spoiling her celebration. I did what I had been wanting to do all evening at that point. I handed my apron to a passing server after untying it and folding it neatly. I think there's been some confusion, I stated in my best CEO voice as I turned to face the room. This motel is owned by myself, Kinsley Wong. Actually, I am the owner of all 17 Grand Meridian hotels. You could hear the gasps. The Botox resisted Mrs. Ashford's attempt to show shock. Madison appeared to have just been informed that Santa Claus existed, but he had been purposefully avoiding her home. I wasn't finished, though. I took out my phone and plugged it into the AV system in the ballroom. I had put a small override function in each of my properties. Security tape started to play on the enormous displays that had been displaying love pictures of Madison and Brett. It was obvious that Mrs. Ashford was buying off the employee. Once more, she was searching Madison's purse. Then my phone began to play the audio file that she had attempted to place. It was a recording of Madison from a prior discussion that had been altered to seem as though she was disparaging the Ashfords and boasting about stealing their money. The room exploded. The evidence on the screen surrounding her was practically larger than life, despite Mrs. Ashford's best efforts to explain. Mr. Ashford appeared to wish he might vanish into his seat. Brett stood motionless, staring at Madison and his mother as if he were witnessing a tennis play in purgatory. I wasn't going to let Chase, the cryptocurrency Casanova, get away with it. "Oh, Chase," I said pleasantly. "Are you still interested in talking about the business proposal where you said that if I was kind to you, my life would change? If anyone is interested, I also have that on tape." His face changed from red to white to green. An embarrassing Christmas color scheme. Madison discovered her voice, and it was unhappy. She accused me of intentionally embarrassing her in front of everyone, undermining her engagement, and being envious. She genuinely said, "You've always been jealous of me," which, if it weren't so depressing, would have been amusing. I gave her a whole minute to vent. The number of accusations she was able to make in such a short period of time was quite astounding. I then displayed the folder that David had provided me. I said simply, "The Ashfords' check bounced. They lacked the funds to cover the cost of this celebration. Public records actually show that they have very little money for anything. The family estate has 3 mortgages. 2 years ago, Brett's trust fund was depleted, and between them roughly 15 credit cards were maxed out." Mrs. Ashford attempted to object, but I also projected the public records onto the displays using my phone. Anybody who chose to investigate may find publicly accessible information, such as court documents and property records. I went on. "You were going to use Madison for money. You believed I had money, and you believed her family had money. You were only partially correct, though. I do have money, but you won't receive any of it." I looked at Madison, who had changed from being furious to being heartbroken. "From the beginning, they have been manipulating you. A private investigator was employed by Mrs. Dashford to investigate our family. The invoice is right here with me. By the way, it was charged to a credit card that is currently over its limit." There was mayhem in the room. There were whispers among the guests. Some were using their phones to record in public. The Ashfords appeared to be sinking into their seats as well. The finest part, though, was still to come. I said, "Now let's talk about the bill for the party tonight. Without gratuity, it comes to $47,000. I have 2 choices because this is officially their son's engagement party, and the Ashfords are unable to pay. First, I report service theft to the police. Or 2, the Ashfords can discreetly depart now, and if the wedding is still planned, I'll cover the expense as a wedding present for my sister." When Brett eventually spoke up, everyone was taken aback. With tears in his eyes, he turned to Madison and confessed that he was unaware of his parents' plots. He acknowledged that he was aware of their financial situation, but he believed they were managing it honorably rather than by attempting to deceive his fiancé's family. Madison's meticulously applied makeup was streaming down her face in designer streams as she sobbed. "You own this place, all of them," she said as she gave me her first meaningful glance of the evening. However, I wondered. Your online thing? The tool I created to handle hotel reservations was my internet endeavor. I gave an explanation. It was so successful that I bought my first hotel and then another with the money I made. Next, the whole chain I attempted to tell you several times, but every time I brought up work you would shift the topic. The Ashfords were attempting to depart discreetly. However, I needed to play one more card. The man you bought off to ruin the celebration is Mrs. Ashford. In actuality, he is a member of my security team. Your whole chat, including the portion when you talked about wrecking the party to make Madison seem bad so Brett would call off the engagement, is on tape. Do you want me to perform that for everyone? She virtually bolted for the door, grabbed her husband's arm, and gave a vigorous shake of her head. Chase muttered something about how this was all a misunderstanding before attempting to follow. Do you recall the security guard at the start of the evening? Was standing at the door, and I nearly felt horrible when I saw the horrified expression on his face when he realized who I was. Nearly. After that, the ballroom cleared out really quickly. Finding out that the bride's sister owns the venue and the hosts are broke is the worst way to ruin a party. Surrounded by pricey centerpieces and dashed hopes, Madison and Brett sat at their table. My parents, who had been silent the entire time, were staring at me as if I had just declared that I was from Mars. At last, Madison got up and approached me. I anticipated another outburst because her shoulders were trembling. Rather, she put her arms around me, cried into my shoulder, and used her makeup to destroy my old college sweatshirt. She kept saying, "I'm so sorry. I sincerely apologize. I didn't know who you were. I didn't want to see you. I couldn't see who you truly were because I was so preoccupied with becoming someone I'm not." She was still my sister in spite of everything, so I gave her a hug in return. Are you curious about the truly depressing part? I would have helped if you had just asked, I said. No inquiries were made. That's what families do. Brett came over to us with trepidation, as if he thought I may also throw him out. However, I could see that his parents' actions had truly saddened him. He volunteered to work to reimburse the party expenses, apologized deeply, and stated that he understood Madison's decision to call off the engagement. Madison glanced at him, then at me, then back at him. Your parents are terrible, she said in a direct manner. Incredibly awful, but you defied them, and you're not like them at all. Therefore, yes, if you still wish to wed me despite the fact that I'm not wealthy, that I've been acting like someone I'm not, and that I've been terrible to my wonderful sister. Although it wasn't the most romantic proposal acceptance I had ever witnessed, it was more sincere than anyone had been that evening. The following day, I gave Madison a job, not out of sympathy, but because anyone who could plan an event with so many moving parts, even if it went horribly wrong, had the ability she needed to develop humility and respect for others. And in the hotel business, there's no better place to start than at the bottom. Every department will employ you. I explained everything to her, including the kitchen, front desk, and housekeeping. Every employee you intimidate today will receive an apology from you. And you will learn this business from the ground up. With mascara still running down her face, she nodded enthusiastically. Brett stated that rather than relying on his family's reputation, he wanted to work and earn his own money for once. I promised to look into our accounting department for him. It turns out that his parents had never allowed him to use his degree in finance. As I was leaving, the security guard from the start discovered me. In 30 seconds, he apologized almost 17 times, possibly setting a record. He was simply doing his job, I informed him, but perhaps the next time he should focus on people's faces rather than their clothing. I feared his head could fall off because of how forcefully he nodded. In addition to receiving full pay for the remainder of the evening, Fipe and the kitchen crew received a bonus for handling Madison's mayhem. The flowers were given to a nearby nursing home, and the celebration food was donated to a local shelter. The Ashfords had little dignity to start with, but that was the only thing that was wasted. Madison began her first housekeeping job at 5 in the morning a week later. Despite the early hour, she texted me a photo of herself wearing the uniform and grinning. Day 1 of discovering my true self, she wrote. While working in the accounting department, Brett realized he was skilled at something other than spending money. For the first time, he and Madison paid their own rent when they moved into a tiny flat. They appeared joyful than I had ever witnessed. 2 months later, the Ashfords lost their estate. Mrs. Ashford attempted to sue me for defamation, but when everything that is published about you is accurate, it is difficult to prove defamation. And on camera, they relocated to Florida, where they are very likely attempting to trick more gullible families with daughters who qualify. Among my employees, the security footage from that evening became legendary. Naturally, it became our unofficial training film on how not to treat people after someone said it to a music gold digger. A year later, Madison and Brett tied the knot in a modest ceremony held in the grounds of my hotel. Two people who had discovered the hard way that it's always better to be yourself than to pretend to be someone you're not. No pretense, no falsehoods. Madison was adamant about making her bridal entry through the service entrance. She claimed that was the start of her actual adventure.